Hi, my name's Bob Greenyer and I'm a volunteer with the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. In this video I'd just like to go over a database implementation of part of Dr. Alexander Parkhomov's fusion fission table, and that is the 2 nuclide to 2 nucleide, mostly nucleon in the form of neutron transfers but also proton transfers, where you have a stable isotope moving to a stable isotope for the most part. And I want to put it into context with this table that I found in this old Soviet encyclopedia referenced on the web that I included in one of the recent STEAMIT presentations for the MFMP STEAMIT. And essentially I wanted to look at just show you how the query works in the most basic sense, and with reference to some of the most common element that have been observed in transmutations in this Miley study and with our own work. So one thing that's very interesting to me is there seems to be a tendency for elements to not want to get too far up here with these transmutations. And also when they're over here, they're very reactive, and maybe they're gases, so they off gas, so you won't observe those. But down in these atomic volume troughs, there seems to be a benefit for elements to move into that direction. And so the most common one that is found is iron, and that was found in also Osua reactions. Dr. George Eagly's Nova reactor and the work that we did there. Also with John Hutchison, we've demonstrated observing that on his samples in these focused points. And so iron is very, very common. As you can see, it's all the way down here in this atomic volume trough. And you will know that it's special in terms of its Ng per nucleon, which makes things beneficial to go into that direction. But interestingly, copper is very commonly observed, and also lead here. Now, this was observed by 4 labs, but we observed lead in 2 different processes, in ECHO, the foil process, but predominantly in the fuel-making process, where you had, at least on the surface analysis, up to sort of 50-60% lead produced. And so we're going to look at this within some context. And also down here we've got osmium, which is fairly interesting because it is the rarest stable element isotope on Earth, but it's also the densest, I think, stable element, or it's nearly twice the density of lead. And the thing about lead is it isn't just us and these 4 people here that have observed this. Also, it's been observed by Adamenko, and it was one of his most common observations, and also Leclerc, one of his most common observations. And I'm going to say now that I believe that lead is observed very commonly in Lena reactions because it is the heaviest stable isotope in the periodic table. And so when the active agent wishes to make it has too much energy going in and it's wishing to keep things stable, its only real choice at the end of the table here is lead. And in the case of Suhas Ralkar's Echo fuel, I believe that it was making a lot of lead because he was really pushing so much energy into it with that 4.5 kilowatts of 19.46 kilohertz ultrasound for 200 hours, and it really was pushing the limit. And I would expect that, like Leclerc found, when you pushed it even further, it would jump across and you would start to get some radioactive elements being produced because the active agent simply can't dump any more energy in the organized matter, the as I call it, the implosion reorganized matter. And so the interesting thing then is if we start with lead and we put lighter elements with the lead, this should be beneficial in terms of release of energy. So what I'm saying is it's trying to dump more energy into a particular nuclide, and that is why we get a lot of production of lead if the system is working too hard. And if we mix some lead with other elements down here, then we could maybe get energetically beneficial outputs. So the other point is that lead is also the very first element of alchemy. So lead and iron and copper and potassium and many of these elements are the original elements of alchemy. So I just want to look at doing a couple of fun experiments, basic experiments and fun experiments to explore some of this atomic volume here using this 2 nuclide to 2 nuclide database. So the principle of the table is that you have your Z number here and the atomic number. The combination of one side to the other side should equal. And most people will not necessarily know that their fuel is a single isotope. They won't be generally putting, say, single isotope nickel in there, for instance, or single isotope, I don't know, titanium. They could put single isotope aluminium in because it is single isotope, so that's very common. And in fact, one of the most common ways to get to iron is to combine two aluminiums. That's 227 aluminium, and that leads you to iron 54. So this George Ohsawa reaction table. But there's another way you can get there. You can that Sundar Sen and John Bockris at Texas A&M, when they were replicating George Ohsawa, they found that using 2 carbon 12s and 2 oxygen 18s, you can get iron 56 plus helium 4. So there are various ways to get to iron, but as I was saying, it is the most observed, and you can see in the Hutchison sample here, there's iron being observed as well as copper and zinc here. So these are kind of alchemical. You see, we've got copper and zinc and iron there. So these are kind of the alchemical things. So it'd be a bit of fun to play around with those. Now, most people probably don't know their Z numbers for elements, but I do pretty much know every abbreviation of elements in the periodic table. So Phillip Power from New Zealand has done the first implementation of the 2 nuclide to 2 nuclide, and it's here. Maybe I can zoom into this. It's going to be possible to zoom in? No, it's not possible to zoom in. So hopefully you can see that. And what I've done is got a variation, a selection of reactions here. So if we go back to our table here and we look at, say, let's look at cobalt and copper. This should not really give us too many highly energetic options here, because it's either side of nickel, which is right the way down there. So let's try E1 and E2. That's element 1 and element 2, and see what we get from that when we put that into the table here. So it's E1 equals single quote cobalt single quote, and E2 equals single quote Cu single quote. So I'll fire that in there. And we're getting some iron and zinc and some nickel reactions out of that. And these are sort of 1.68 mega electron volts, and there's a 2 there. But none of them are more than sort of about 4 mega electron volts. Still bags of energy, but this is nuclear we're talking about, so one might expect that. I'm gonna look at iron and zinc. So iron's already pretty much down there. Let's put those in and see what we get here. And so there's more reactions there with iron and zinc. So if we go back here, we're looking at iron and zinc. So we're putting a bigger spread around nickel there. And so that gives us more reactions here. Now, when you actually do elements that are very far apart, you can end up with incredible numbers of energy positive reactions. Now, the reason energy positive reactions is important is that it's essentially saying that it is able to be compressed into a smaller volume. This implosion view that I have, it's imploding the material, the nucleons, and so in the view of Adamenko, it's trying to form stable nuclei, and the more compressed it is, the more stable it is, the longer it will survive. So you're looking for really stable nuclei to survive and come out at the end. So not all of these options may be the most favourable. Maybe it's the ones that release the most energy that are the most favourable when you're talking about an implosion technology. Okay, so then I would like to look at some little bit more interesting ones. So the alchemical metals are gold, silver, mercury, copper, lead, iron, and tin. So we've observed tin being produced in Suhas Ralkar's machine. In fact, it's basically lead, iron, tin. Yeah, and his foil was producing gold, silver, lead, and obviously it had iron in there already. So anyway, so I'm going to try a few of these. So I'm going to put in, just before we go to that, I want to put in zirconium here because we've seen a lot of zirconium. So I'm going to put an iron and tin and see what we get. So I'm really just having a bit of fun here and showing you kind of how powerful this is, even in the simple form for looking through the more than 500,000 reactions that have a net positive outcome. So here we go, just iron and tin here, two alchemical metals, and a whole bunch of outcomes here, essentially krypton and zirconium. So you wouldn't see the krypton, that would go away, and you'd just see the zirconium. In fact, if you just look for reactions that have a zirconium output, it's phenomenal number of reactions. Okay, and this is something that we were talking about here, where zirconium is over on this side, and it's kind of like these things get up to a point and then jumps across, is what I was saying in the previous presentation. So I'm going to do something with just straight iron and lead, and you will see it's ridiculous, the number of outputs. So what we're looking at here is we've got iron all the way over here, and we've got lead all the way over here. So firstly, in terms of atomic volume, there's a lot of dropping to do. But also, there's other places here which also have low atomic volume all over the place. So let's throw that in there, iron and lead. And actually, it might take quite some time, but there are just a phenomenal number of outputs here. So it's just silly. And some of them have got scary amounts of energy outputs, you know, in the 19 mega electron volts here. Now, what I would suggest is that probably the ones that are most favorable out of here would be ones with low atomic volume. So it might be nice to be able to just put inputs and outputs, and then just sort of have some way of grouping to low atomic volume outputs in the output columns to maybe hone the outputs. Obviously, if you already have inputs and some outputs from your experiments that's already been done, then you may be able to assess how much energy is potentially there that might come out of your reactor. So I'm going to do a couple of ones here. So if I start with two alchemical metals, iron and lead, this is just a bit of fun here, and I want to see if I'm producing gold. There we go. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 reactions that are beneficial, ranging from just over 11 mega electron volts to 20.42 mega electron volts. And the outputs are copper and gold, both valuable metals. I think they're both more valuable than your iron and lead input. And we saw gold in the Echo Phillip foil, and there was iron on the electrode, and there lead produced in there. Now, the lead was on the opposite side of the foil, so only on one side. And the question is that like the lead that gets produced by the strike from Adamenko's, what he calls the Electron Nucleon macro cluster? It's just such an intense pulse that it has to dump the energy into lead to produce a stable element, and then you get the iron and the lead moving through and maybe yielding the gold. Now, this is obviously a gross simplification of what might be going on in an implosion process. It is only looking at 2 to 2, whereas actually, if you could imagine, the actual process is a very large amount of nucleons all interacting at the same time. This is essentially what both Shoulders and Adamenko are saying. So, but this may give you some understanding that these things are possible to yield energy. So let's say we put then the copper that comes out of this, again with the lead that's left in our reaction mix, and see if we can get any more gold out of that. And maybe I put that in there wrong. Or someone's changing something. There should be something. I'm going to change this in here, because if you get the wrong type of quote mark, it doesn't work. So CU and E2, I think. Okay, there you go. If you get the wrong type of quote mark, it doesn't work. So it does need to be the right quote marks, but you can copy it from the instructions up here. So again, copper plus lead, we're getting 10 to 17 mega electron volts. Obviously, copper is closer to lead, so there's less benefit to the nucleon reorganization process. And again, we're only looking at gold here. Now, if I change that germanium there, that this is output, which is not an alchemical metal, and we submit that, we then can create bromine and gold. And again, the gaps, the range of energies is getting lower. But there's more gold. So you've got a stepwise process starting with iron and lead and producing stepwise more and more gold. Of course, the problem that there is there, if I go back to here maybe, is that where's gold? It's somewhere around here. AU somewhere here. Gold. I've lost it. Anyway, lead's up here. So it's favourable for that to go down there, but it's almost more favourable to go to osmium. And one wonders why there isn't more osmium in nature if that has happened. And if I actually look for osmium here, maybe let's try just osmium. And I'm just going to just put the output as osmium. There we go. Done. And this is going to sit there for quite a while, and there is a ridiculous number of outputs that come to osmium. I mean, it's just literally pages and pages and pages, and I'm hoping that Philip will put a number of query returns here so you can get an idea when roughly thumbnailing through this. It's just a ridiculous. I'm scrolling. There are maybe tens of thousands, or certainly thousands, or seems like thousands, but definitely hundreds of potential outputs. Now, why would you not therefore see more osmium? Yes, it is quite often seen, and it's an extremely rare isotope on Earth. But then you could argue that then osmium with anything else is going to want to create an energetically favourable reaction and go somewhere else. So let's try that then. So let's assume we have, I don't know, let's take something completely random. So I'm going to take, my second element is osmium, my first element will be, I don't know, let's say nickel. And then I'm going to fire that in there, see if we get any returns. There we go. So just nickel and osmium. You're getting krypton and erbium and neodymium. And again, look, so many outputs from having osmium. So, and some of them are so ridiculously energetically favourable. You see, 70 mega electron volts, 60, 70 again. Very, very energetically favourable process to take that osmium that's come from that lead, or whatever, and 80 there in the 80s. So lots of reasons why the osmium wouldn't end up, if the same process was going on and you had any other lighter elements there that it can work with. So whilst they have seen osmium, these three different people, and we might have a point to make about that in the future, there is a desire to release energy. So if the system isn't in a situation where it's being force-fed energy, it's force-fed energy, and it's pushing over to lead and beyond. So Leclerc observed heavier elements than lead, all the elements of the periodic table, and I believe Norris Peary did also. If you're not got so much energy going in, and you've got lighter elements available, then you could imagine that it wants to release energy. So it's a case of treating it in the right way, let's say, if this is really what's going on. And so that's basically what I wanted to say. So have fun with the table. Like I say, for me, it's easier to think about things with the elements abbreviation. But if you want, if you are putting specific isotopes into your fuel and you want to see what the potential outcome is, you can really build queries that allow you to put the Z and the A numbers in there, both for the inputs and the output, and establish much tighter groupings of search query output. Thank you very much for your time.